The program you are about to see is part of a Cal State Fullerton President's Symposium, where we offered a forum to some of the nation's leading voices on the important and pressing issues impacting and challenging public higher education and our broader communities. We hope you enjoy the program and trust it will provide valuable insights about the important issues, impacts, and challenges facing us today. At Cal State Fullerton, our daily mission is education and knowledge creation. We're committed to being a leader in creating the future of higher education.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Well, thank you, Professor Kleinjans, for that helpful overview of trends in inequality and social mobility in the United States. And I want to thank Interim President Hagan and Dr. Boyum, Executive Assistant to the President, for inviting me to participate here this morning. As Dr. Let's see if we can get this to, as Dr. Here, oh. Which one do I press? Okay. You can just go ahead, slide to the next slide. Oh, it's locked. Well, as Dr. Kleinjans just showed us, inequality is growing rapidly. As you see in the very first figure in my handout there, you'll see that this is from the Congressional Budget Organization's most recent study of inequality. It's really, and it shows that it's not only that inequality is growing, that its cumulative impact has been pretty profound. For the top 1% of the income distribution, they have grown in their share of after-tax income by close to 400% over the past 3 decades or so. When you look at the next level of income down, those in the 81st to the 99th percentile, their share of after-tax income has grown by over 100%. And those in the 21st to the 80th percentile have achieved just a modest growth of only 30% in their cumulative after-tax income. So this is not just a yearly difference, it's taken a toll over the last 30 years. So if we look, despite the arresting nature of those trends, the public seems to be somewhat muted or subdued in their response. Aside from the vocal minorities in the Tea Party and Occupy movement, Americans seem relatively tolerant of inequality, and we know lots of scholars have commented on this relative comparative acceptance between in the United States versus citizens of other countries of wider ranges of inequality based on our strong allegiance to the principles of liberal individualism, the idea that anybody can make it if they work hard. We, as President Hagan mentioned at the top of this first thing this morning, we really, as Americans, favor this idea of equality of opportunity, but there's a lot more controversy about policies that are aimed at trying to guarantee equality of results. So if you look at this Gallup poll, you can see some of this reflected. This is pretty recent. In a poll this past winter, they asked how much importance people placed on having the federal government respond with policies to problems of the economy, equality of opportunity, and reducing inequality. And the results confirm what these scholars have been arguing. 82% felt it was important or extremely important for the federal government to grow and expand the economy, not surprising. Everyone feels that jobs and the economy are the issue. 70% felt that it was important or extremely important to increase equality of opportunity, but less than a majority, 46%, felt that we should be focused on reducing the income and wealth gap. And here you can see trends from Gallup showing that Americans have grown increasingly sensitive to inequality, but until very recently, when you would have expected greater sensitivity to inequality as the economy turned down. So those who see the nation as divided into 2 groups, the haves and have-nots, grew steadily since the late 80s, and they reached a peak in 2008. But then they've declined somewhat. The blue line represents the percentage who felt that we are divided into these 2 groups, and the red line represents those who don't feel that we have a pronounced class division. And if you look here, you'll see that most Americans see themselves as being in the haves rather than the have-nots. And that difference between those who say they're in the haves, the blue line, versus the have-nots has remained steadily for quite some time, since the late 80s. Not surprising there. So, all pointing out that while inequality has reached alarming proportions, not really seen since the Gilded Age at the turn of the last century, the way that this problem is filtered through the political process is very complex. And I wanted to see how that played out in our own backyard right here in Orange County. And I'm drawing on a survey here this morning that the Cal State Fullerton Center for Public Policies did. We do these surveys very periodically. They did a poll of Orange County residents, and it was conducted under the auspices of our Social Sciences Research Center. Last month, we interviewed 583 randomly selected individuals 18 years or older, and the details of the sampling are in the last slide of my presentation. You can look at it later. Putting Orange County in context first before we look at the poll numbers, the first thing to know is our rapid growth. And you see a map here of incorporated areas in Orange County in 1954. Those colorful places are the places where people were living. The rest of it are unincorporated, essentially. And then you see the big difference here by now. And we are now a county of over 3 million residents. In some areas have grown very rapidly in the last 10 years. In particular, Irvine, Newport Beach, growing by more than 20% just from 2000 to 2010. And we're also increasingly diverse. If you look at these numbers a little more carefully when you have a chance, you'll see that while our white population in Orange County has declined from 65% of the total population to 61%, you'll see the Latino population has increased from 31 to 34%. It's still lower than California as a whole, which is at 38% of the population is Latino. But another less told story is that the Asian population in Orange County is rising fairly rapidly from 14% of the population in 2000 to 18% currently. So what about trends in inequality in Orange County? If you look at the income data that I've given you here, you'll see, this is all from the census, by the way, and different places. And what you see is that the percentage of the county bottom line is that inequality is not as pronounced in Orange County as it is in other areas, not surprisingly. While the share of the population in the lower income groups over the last 10 years has declined, the number of households in the upper income groups have increased. But that's if we look at household income. If we look at families, we find that they're being harder hit by the growing inequality. We find that median family income has declined significantly over the last 5 years by over 10% in the whole state. And in Orange County, we've seen declines that have exceeded the declines in our neighboring Los Angeles County, while San Diego County has seen an increase in their median family income during the same period. So all in all, we can see that while inequality is significant in Orange County, it may be less pronounced and visible than in other places in the nation or than in the nation as a whole. And that suggests that researchers who are looking at this really need to take a local perspective as well as a national perspective in terms of looking at the political. And that last piece here, very briefly, looking at us politically, everyone knows that Orange County's got this reputation for conservatism, and the most recent party registrations figures confirm this. We're firmly a red county. But note two things here. This is the lowest percentage of Republican registrants in Orange County in a long time, and that the fastest growing and increasingly large group of undeclared and independent voters, 22%, is really significant. As you'll see, Democrats and Republicans are sharply divided in Orange County. That's probably our sharpest divide. But those independent voters move in some unpredictable ways, depending on the issue. So let's focus on a few poll questions here. The first I'm showing asks the respondents if they approve or disapprove of the way their city government, and then we'll look also at Orange County government, handles this job. First, city government. And you see here that majorities in every income approve of their city government, but that the wealthiest respondents do so more than the poorest. 69% approve in the wealthiest, but only 61%. But still, majorities everywhere. And if you look at differences here in race, Asians are more likely to approve, 82%, but whites and Hispanics and African Americans are all very likely to approve. So Orange Countyans as a whole are pretty happy with their city government. We're a little less happy, and in partisanship, there's not much difference here. But if you look at Orange County, there's less approval overall. 61% of Orange Countyans approve of the job their county government's doing, while 68% approve of their city government as a whole. And we look at the same similar kind of relationships. Lower income groups are less approving than higher income, and Republicans are more approving than Democrats, but not by much. And independents are the least approving, which is something to take note of. It makes no difference whether you're registered to vote or not. 61% in both groups approve of their government, and racial categories are pretty insignificant, the differences there. So far, not a lot of impact of inequality, partisanship, racial differences on how Orange Countyans view their local government. But on questions where the underlying issue of economic inequality is much more pronounced, there are larger differences. Governor Brown has recently proposed to temporarily increase the sales tax and increase income tax rates on the wealthiest in order to reduce budget cuts in the areas of education and public safety. When we asked Orange Countyans what they think about that, those in the bottom part of the income scale are much more likely to approve than those at the top of the scale. Likewise, Hispanics and African Americans are much more likely to approve of Brown's plan to equalize income, redistribute income, than whites or Asians. But the biggest differences here are partisan, not surprisingly, because it's a political proposal, with 86% of Democrats approving and only 22% of Republicans in Orange County approving of this. So Brown may have a lot of difficulty, by the way, in getting this, getting more support, because at least in Orange County, those who are registered to vote favor it only slightly by 52%, where those who are not registered to vote are much more in favor of this, 67%. It's kind of an interesting aside. Now, when you ask Orange Countyans if they perceive any conflict between the poor and the rich, and you compare that to how they perceive conflict between African Americans and whites, blacks and whites, you see that the gap between the rich and the poor has become more politically salient than the historical potency of the racial divide. 60% felt that there was very strong or strong conflict between the rich and the poor, while only 49% in Orange County felt that there was such conflict between blacks and whites. Now that might be explainable by the very small proportion of our population that is African American, less than 2%, and the small proportion of the state's population that is African American, just 6%. But what's interesting about the way the public sees this conflict is that class and race do not, if you break up our population by class and race, you stratify us by class and race, you don't see a lot of significant differences here. 60% of those who are in households earning in the lowest income bracket between $0 and $35,000 a year see conflict between the rich and the poor, and 58% in the next income bracket, 63 among the middle, and 56 in the highest, 56% of those in the highest bracket. So not a lot of difference based on income in terms of their perceptions of inequality. If you look further at race, very little difference at all. All whites, Latinos, Asians, multi-ethnics, all of them see about 60% sense that there's a conflict between the rich and the poor. Now, when you ask them about conflict between blacks and whites, you see that African Americans, big jump up, 100% of African Americans, a very small, statistically not significant proportion, but 100% of our respondents answered they saw conflict between blacks and whites. But basically, the issue of race is becoming less pronounced than the issue of inequality. We do see some significant differences between partisans. 61% of Democrats see that conflict between rich and poor as pronounced. Only 56% of Republicans do, and 59%, slightly more, of independents. Lastly, if we ask about social mobility, here's where we really start to see the difference. We asked this question. Thinking about the country today, how common is it for someone to start poor, work hard, and become rich? Would you say it's very common, somewhat uncommon, or very uncommon? And collapsing those categories, what you'll see here is strong differences by class. Right? 59% of those who are making more than $200,000 a year in their household say it's common. the conflict between the rich and the poor. 44% in the lowest, 59% say it's common for people to rise, to have that social mobility, while 44% of those in the lowest income group and 46% in the next highest see that opportunity. There are a few differences here as well on based on race, where Republicans, the key thing here is that Republicans are much more likely to believe in social mobility than Democrats. 56% of Republicans answered that this was common, that people could start out poor and end up rich. Only 36% of Orange County Democrats felt that way, with independents in the middle. So, in conclusion, while sensitivity to inequality and inequality itself is fairly muted in Orange County compared to the national context, there are much clearer differences in perceptions of opportunity. And since Americans are more accepting of inequality than citizens in most other advanced industrial democracies, largely because of their belief that anyone can make it here if they work hard. As Orange County residents begin to feel that the possibility of that social mobility is constricting, they may become increasingly interested in inequality and increasingly concerned about the inequality that we've seen documented here this morning. Thank you very much.